Chapter 11. Anthony. I pulled up my trousers and fastened them quickly, fear whistling through my veins. "What do you mean, purple? I have blue eyes." I knew exactly what she was talking about, of course, and yet everything inside of me shouted out in denial. I was a dragon shifter, not a sorcerer. I didn't want my mother's curse. I didn't want purple eyes. Charity pushed her skirts back down and covered her creamy thighs, then hopped off the desk. What are you getting all upset about?" She was right. I was upset, and I couldn't put a lid on it. I grabbed for my shirt and my jacket, trying to distract myself by dressing so that I would have the chance to calm down. It didn't work. "I'm fine." "You're not fine," she snapped. "1 minute we're having this beautiful moment when I'm telling you something important, and then you—" She waved her hand around instead of finishing. "What?" I demanded, whirling on her. "What did I do wrong?" She frowned. "I don't understand what's going on right now." My throat closed up, and I pushed the feeling of anxiety away. "Do not." I shook myself, the need to fly away from here clamping down on me. She didn't understand that I needed to leave. I had to, before I shifted inside this small room and hurt her. I ran for the door, and she followed me. I ran through the foyer and onto the palace steps. There, I let my dragon take over. He filled me up, my magic pulsing with too much intensity to contain. No, I didn't want magic. It was a curse. My freakish DNA. I let my shifter take hold of my body, my mate standing on the top step of the castle stairs, staring at me with obvious confusion as I opened my wings and took to the sky. When would I be finally able to be me? When would she be safe from me? When would my mother take away this curse and give us the chance to be together? I flew and flew until my body ached and my heart hurt, and then I turned around and glided all the way home. When I finally arrived and shifted back to human form, I could barely lift my arms. It was dark, and the inside of the castle roared with the heat of various fireplaces, all lit and crackling with local firewood. "Can I help you to your room, sire?" asked Thomas, one of our servants. I shook my head wearily. "No, but thank you." I could have used the help, but I was too ashamed to take the strength the servant offered. Charity was going to hate me when she found out that I'd lied to her. About my magic and our bond and everything. And even if I hadn't directly lied, I'd deliberately kept the truth from her, and that was just as bad. Despite my exhaustion from the flight, I managed to get to my bedroom and practically fell into the shower, making the water as hot as I could stand it in an attempt to wash away my thoughts. Despite the heat of the shower, I couldn't stop shaking. My body felt like the cold had filled my bones with ice. Eventually, though, the hot water pummeling me from the showerhead defrosted me slowly, all the way to my core. I stayed under the steady stream until I could no longer stand. Instead, I sat on the tiles beneath the heat. Exhausted. Devastated. Empty. What had I done? "What in dragon's name are you doing?" A loud voice interrupted my reverie. Karlak? What was my brother doing here? "Well," he demanded again, stomping into the bathroom and leaning into the shower to turn off the tap with an angry flick of his wrist. "You've used a whole kingdom's worth of water. Were you seriously that dirty from your flight?" I stared up at my older brother, shocked that he was back home. I'd thought he was away, and quite frankly, he was the last person I expected to see. Worry and misery coursed through my veins, making it almost impossible to speak. "Karlak, guy." He offered me a hand, and, when I accepted, hefted me to my feet. "Let's get you dry and warm and into bed. Seriously, Anthony. I leave the castle for a single month, and your whole life apparently falls off the edge of the world. My brother grumbled away, shaking his head and acting like an old mother hen. I didn't stop him. In fact, the fuss was reassuring in a strange way. Karlak was 3 years older than me and had always been the classic older brother. The intelligent, overly confident boy who everyone knew would one day be the king of his people. He was the responsible one, not me. I'd never had to be, as the perennial prince. Finally, as he pulled back the covers and pushed me into bed, I found my voice. "How are the twins?" I asked. "They're fine. Don't worry about my family, little brother. Worry about yours." "Mine?" I said, confused. "I don't have a family. Not like that, anyway. Not past my parents and brother. My mate would never love me, now that she knew what sort of monster I was." Karlak dragged a chair from a corner of the room and set it beside my bed. There he sat, his brow furrowed and twisted, as he stared at me with obvious concern. "Not yet, you don't," he said. "But you have a mate, and if you're lucky, you'll have a child soon enough. What are you doing flying around aimlessly until you're so exhausted you can barely make it back home?" I shuffled in bed to hide my discomfort, rearranging the blankets. I hated hearing the disappointment in his voice. "How do you know all that?" "Mother had another vision," Karlak said, as though that was a run-of-the-mill type of thing. It was for our family, but if Charity heard him, what would she think? "She's worried about you. And she's even more worried about what's going to happen between you and Charity." I sighed and let my head fall back against the pillow. "Thank you for coming to check on me, brother, but I'm okay. I just needed to fly today. To get out. Get away." Karlak groaned and muttered something incoherent. I lifted my head and met Karlak's angry gaze. "What are you running from?" He blasted the question at me, his words now clear as day. "Seriously, Anthony, you're always hiding and keeping yourself in check. For what? You're not the crown prince. Of the two of us, you're the one who's meant to be the wild one. You're meant to be having fun. What are you so worried about?" I couldn't answer him. I didn't want to. But my magic had other ideas. It swelled inside of me, seeking a place amongst my family, where it had always wanted to be. "Karlak, Whoa! What's happening with your eyes?" He craned his neck to look closer, and I jerked away, staring down at my lap. Fury rushed through me at my magic's betrayal. It was meant to disappear, to die a quick death. And yet it seemed to be growing stronger, more out of control than ever before. "It's nothing," I muttered, not daring to look up. Karlak grunted. "Your eyes used to do that magic thing when we were kids, you know. Same as Mom's. I just didn't say anything." My head came up fast. "What do you mean?" Karlak rolled his eyes. "I'm your brother, Anthony. I shared a room with you. Did you seriously think you could hide your magic powers from me?" "I don't have magic," I exclaimed, even though I knew it was stupid to deny something he was obviously aware of. When it came to my magic, my default setting seemed to be to lie about it. Karlak glared at me. "You're sitting there lying to my face when we both know the truth. I can't believe it." He got up, flicked his jacket to straighten it, and stalked toward the door. "Hey, where are you going?" I called out. "Did you seriously just fly all the way home to call me a liar, then leave again?" Karlak turned to stare at me. He would be a great king when the time came. He'd been able to cow just about anyone since he was 6 years old with that look. "You are a liar, Anthony," he said, more gently than I expected. "You just lied to me, but saddest of all, You're lying to yourself." Shock coursed through me at his words. Shock and shame. He was right, but denying my magic was so ingrained I didn't know how not to do that. He shook his head when I didn't respond. "I came home to see if I could help you, but it's obvious you're past the point of no return." When Karlak turned to leave again after delivering that cryptic pronouncement, I groaned. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means grow up, Anthony," Karlak snapped. "Face up to your demons, acknowledge who you are and stop being afraid of it, claim your mate, and seriously, grow the fuck up." Then he left and slammed the door for good measure. I sat amongst my warm blankets staring after him, my cheeks blazing. Everything he'd said was correct. I was a lying, spoilt and immature prince, and it was time I grew up. Is that how Charity saw me too? I needed to go see her and check if she was okay. I threw back the covers and rushed to throw on some clothes. Where was Charity right now? When I'd left her, I froze, one leg in my pants. The full impact of what I'd done to her hit me like a lightning bolt. Oh my God. I'd made love to her, then abandoned her. Worse, I'd rejected her by flying away without a backward glance. All because I was afraid of showing her my true self, including the magic inside of me. But Charity wasn't of our world. To her, shifting into a dragon most likely seemed magical. Why would she be worried about whether I had a different kind of magic to other dragon shifters? If she hadn't judged me for morphing into a dragon, why would she judge me for anything else? And Karlak, fuck me. When had he worked out I had the same powers as our mother? Why hadn't he ever said anything? I'd lied about my magic for so long I felt trapped, and the longer it went on, the more terrified I'd been that I would be revealed to be a liar. But I was lying, and he'd always known it. And yet, he'd never stopped caring about me. How had I fucked up so royally? I owed my brother an apology, but my mate was my #1 priority. I finished pulling on my pants, cold chills of dread creeping down my spine. I needed to find Charity, and now. Memories of our lovemaking began to thump into my brain. Damn it, the time we spent together in the library, however brief, had been the single most amazing experience of my life. And I went and fucked it all up. As soon as my sweater was over my head, I ran for the door. I pulled it open, slowed to a jog, and headed for the stairs that led back up to my mother's old tower. Would Charity still be there? When I reached the door to her room, my heart was pounding. But I didn't stop to think. I would only start second-guessing. Instead, I knocked loudly, then pushed the door open, ready for a book to be thrown at my head, or something like it. The sight before me broke my heart in two. Charity was lying on the bed, sobbing. The sounds, clearly wrenched from deep inside her, were bone-crushing to hear. I swallowed hard, pushing the sudden lump down in my throat. "Sweetheart, I am so sorry." As soon as my words found her, Charity scrabbled up to sit on the edge of the bed, her hands clutching at the bedcovers. "Get out of here!" Her eyes flashed, and if I was reading her correctly, it seemed like she hated me. I couldn't blame her. I hated myself for what I'd done. "Please, Charity, let me explain." "No!" she yelled. "I don't want you to explain. I just want to get out of here. I want to go home." Home. To the human world. Back to her thankless job and her tiny apartment. I did the wrong thing, and I know I totally fucked up. I walked toward her, holding out my hands to placate her. Our lovemaking was absolutely beautiful, and A small marble carving sailed at me, and I barely ducked out of its way before it smashed into the wall behind me. "I don't want to hear it!" she screamed. I've been dreaming about you for months, months, and you don't even care about me. I thought we were meant to be, or some crap like that. You almost had me convinced. Almost." She stopped talking, and a loud sob escaped her lips. "But we are meant to be," I exclaimed, staying where I was and readying to duck out of the way again if I needed to. "We're fated mates." "Well, I don't care anymore," she cried. "I just want to go home and get away from you." "All right. I'll take you home," I said, though it hurt me to even say the words. "But please, please, let me explain first." Her lower lip trembled, but I could see by her expression that she was considering my offer. Eventually, she crossed her arms over her chest and glared at me. "Fine. Explain. Then you can take me home." I didn't want to remind her that taking her home would mean carrying her into the human realm, probably on my back, in my shifter form. Today had already been fraught with enough worry. She'd given me the chance to explain, so now I had to give her a reason to stay. I took a deep breath to steady myself. "I'm going to tell you the whole truth, and it's a longish story. Are you okay with that?" She nodded. "Just get on with it." "Okay. So my mother is, well, a sorceress." "A what?" She blinked at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. To her, I guess it was. My heart started to race. I wanted to get this right and not scare her off. In the end, I kept it simple. "Mom has magic." "Like you being a dragon shifter? That sort of magic?" "Not exactly." "Then, what is a sorceress? Is it like a witch or something?" "Sort of. She has magical powers for healing, and she can see prophecies in the future. Things like that. A gift that she considered a blessing and curse in one. A gift that I had only ever seen as a curse." Charity's eyebrows drew together as she considered what I'd said. "She used her magic to heal me from Barry's attack." When I nodded, her expression cleared. "That sounds kinda cool." Now it was my turn to frown. "You don't hate the idea of it?" "Why would I?" "Yes, it's a shock, but to be honest, it was more of a shock to see you turn into a dragon than anything else I've experienced recently. Your mum is lovely, and she helped me in a time of need. That's pretty special, actually." "Well, yes, I suppose it could be seen that way. But my mother grew up with people using her for her abilities, and she can't shift." Charity shrugged. "Yeah? And?" She obviously didn't understand. "Being a dragon shifter is the only thing that ties us all together, everyone in this realm. My mother was alone and felt very out of place." She groaned, the sound full of frustration. "Can you get to the point? I'm a human. I was a waitress who worked her way up to being a manager. I didn't go to college. I'm used to hard work and pain-in-the-ass customers, not magic and flying around the sky." She waved her hands around like she was conducting a spell herself. The thought struck me. How had she known what I looked like before meeting me in person? Could she possibly have had an ancestor who was related to this world? "Charity, you said you dreamed of me, right, before we met?" She nodded, then a wash of redness flushed into her cheeks. "What sort of dreams?" I asked, suspicious of that blush, and suspecting that we weren't simply conversing with one another in those dreams. "None of your business," she snapped, confirming they must have been sexual dreams. "Get to your point," she added. "You have 5 minutes to explain, or I'll find someone else to fly me home. You said everyone in the whole castle is a dragon shifter, right? Even the girls?" I nodded, sick to my stomach at the idea that she would even consider flying away from me. "Yes. Someone will take you home, though I'd prefer to be the one if you still want to leave after I've finished." She made a circular motion with her hand, gesturing for me to hurry up. I shook myself. "Get to the point." "Okay, so basically oh fuck, this is harder to admit than I thought." I cleared my throat. Damn it. Just say it. "That purple swirl you see sometimes in my eyes, it's magic." The words were out, and I tumbled through the rest. "I inherited my mother's magic, as well as my father's ability to shift. But I've been hiding my magic since forever. I don't want it. In fact, I hate it. I've always hated it, and kept it hidden from everyone except my parents." There. I'd gotten it all out. "But why do you hate it?" she asked, which from a human was probably a fair question. "Because it makes me a freak in this world," I told her honestly, keeping it as simple as possible. "My mom is awesome, but she can't shift. Everyone else here can shift, but they don't have magic. Somehow, I have both. I'm different from everyone, and I don't want to be." I took a deep breath and released it slowly. "When you saw my magic after we made love, the purple in my eyes, I lost control. I'm sorry. I know you don't really understand, but I've been hiding this part of myself for my whole life, and the fact that it's now just coming to the surface whenever it wants." I shuddered. "It scares me." She narrowed her eyes. "So let me get this straight. You're like some super-powerful dragon shifter who just happens to have magic as well, and you're so upset by all these awesome gifts because others don't have them that you've freaked out enough to abandon me after the most amazing sex ever." Well, when she put it like that, I risked a smile at her, even as heat bloomed in my cheeks. "It was the most amazing sex ever. Every kiss, every touch told me that you're mine, and I'm yours. It was perfect, Charity. So perfect that you couldn't wait to run away from me the second we were done." She swiped at new tears on her cheeks, as if angry they'd fallen. "I'm so sorry. Will you please forgive me, now that you understand why?" "No, Anthony, I don't forgive you, and that bullshit you just gave me, well, let's just say if your parents were here, I'd give them a right talking to." "My parents?" She began to undress, pushing her warm dress to the floor and opening a drawer to pull out the jeans and sweater that she'd worn here. The servants must have washed out the blood and grime and returned the garments to her. She pulled on her jeans, my gaze going straight to her gorgeous body as she covered it up. I wished I'd been able to have her completely naked beneath me. I would have loved every inch of her. Those delicious breasts and curvy hips. I hadn't been able to see all of her in the library since she'd still worn her dress. She tugged on her sweater and moved to grab a warm jacket from the closet. "Yes, your parents," she said, answering the question I'd forgotten I'd just asked. Her brief nudity had distracted my thoughts. "How could they let you get away with lying to yourself and everyone else?" I put a hand to my head, pressing against a sudden throbbing behind my temple. "What are you talking about?" She pulled the warm jacket on and flicked the hood up over her long dark hair. "I'm talking about the fact that even children are taught better logic than that. At least, they are in the human world. You have been given this incredible gift, the gift of magic as well as shifting, and basically, you just don't want it. You don't want to be one of a kind. You don't want to be special. Well, bad bloody luck! You should have been honest with everyone from the start and celebrated your magic. You're an idiot, and so is anyone who helped you hide an essential part of yourself." She shook her head and pulled on fur-lined gloves she must have been given by one of the servants. "Now, take me home." "But I—" "No." She held her hand out in front of her to stop me. "I listened. That was the deal. And if I'm completely honest, I think you're full of shit. I'm not going to fall in love with an idiot who spent his whole life denying who he is and runs away the moment anyone recognizes how special he is. Now, are you flying me home, or am I finding another dragon to take me?" Anger and anguish flared at the same time within my heart, fighting for supremacy, combining and growing in size. My mate was rejecting me. She was leaving me. My dragon and my sorcerer fought inside my human form, and the fire they both created burned in my veins, desperate for release. Chapter 12. Charity. I could see sudden flames flare bright within Anthony's eyes. Fear struck at my core like a knife to my diaphragm. I'd pushed him too far. He was losing control. No one could keep such power inside themselves, deny it, hate it, and expect it to disappear without a trace. Even I knew that. I wasn't familiar with anything in this world, but it was as clear as the purple eyes in the prince's face that he was losing his battle against his magic. His dragon was beautiful and obviously powerful, but his mother's magic thrived inside of him too, and it had been deprived and denied for far too long. My chest rose and fell as panic set in and my breathing sped up. My heart was hammering against my ribs, and adrenaline zinged along my veins. I needed to get away from Anthony, and fast, before he did something to destroy us both. The bedroom door was still open, so I inhaled a breath for good luck and made a run for it. Flames shot from Anthony's fingers as I ran past him, catching the carpet alight. I screamed as I jumped over the fire and bolted through the door. I raced down the stairs toward the front foyer. I had to find help. I couldn't leave Anthony to burn down the castle. Or worse, to burn himself up. There was a man standing with the butler by the front entrance. He looked different to the servants, taller, with clothes that spoke of wealth. I grabbed his arm, gasping for air. "It's Anthony! He needs help! Please!" The man's blue eyes trained on my face. I immediately knew who he was. "You're Karlach." He nodded. "And you're Charity." "Please, you've got to help him." Karlach started running toward the stairs. "What happened?" I ran behind him, breathless with worry. But still, I managed to call out, "I think it's his magic. It's taking over, and he doesn't know how to control it." I was guessing, of course, but that explanation made the most sense to me, especially when I remembered the bright purple sparking in his eyes as I'd run. Karlach paused at the base of the stairs, the scent of smoke in the air. "That stupid bastard," he growled, then began taking the stairs 2 at a time. I was right on his heels, my heart racing in my chest. I'd never moved so fast in my life. "Where is he?" I called out to Karlach when we both reached the top of the stairs. I covered my mouth and began to cough from the smoke. It was everywhere, in the halls, filling the rooms, but I couldn't see Anthony anywhere. "I think he's on the balcony," Karlach called, pointing ahead of him down the hallway. I took a deep breath and ran through the smoke down the carpet runner in the direction Karlach pointed. I knew I shouldn't be anywhere near this danger, but I couldn't help thinking that this was my fault. And I couldn't bear the thought of something happening to Anthony. He had lost control, all because I'd called him out on something that had been torturing him since he was a child. Wrong or not, misguided or not, he was clearly in pain. I'd done nothing to help him. In fact, I'd made it worse. In my own pain and feelings of rejection, I'd lashed out at him. Rightly so, maybe. But this was going to have devastating consequences, I could already tell. The heat of the flames in the hallway made me flinch, but I kept running. The smoke made my eyes tear up, but I ducked and weaved around the flames until I burst through the open door out onto the balcony. Karlach was close behind me. I turned to see if he was coming, but a wall of fire and smoke rose up, cutting him off from my sight. I blew out gasping breaths, trying to steady myself and stave off panic. The night air out here in comparison to the fire inside was freezing. I shivered, then turned back to see Anthony standing on the balustrade, still dressed, and no sign of his dragon. "Hey!" I called out, still gulping for breath. "What you doing out here?" "You shouldn't have come back," Anthony said, his voice a deep growl. He didn't turn around. I put my hand to my chest, my heart thundering beneath my hand. We were so far up. I had learned that this was the highest tower in the castle, and it was a long way down. "Are you planning on flying us to safety?" I asked. "Because I'm not sure I can get back the way I came." I glanced behind me, amazed that I'd managed to make light conversation when the fire was burning up the castle. Anthony didn't say anything, but I felt his anguish permeating the air between us. He wanted me to leave so he could stay here in his tower of solitude, stewing on his feelings. Time to change tack. I'd seen so much beauty in this man, and I had to find a way to reach the prince who wanted my love. He had to be inside there still, surely. "How strong is this fated mate bond you've been talking about?" I asked, shivering as much because of fear than because of the icy cold air. I could still feel the hot furnace behind me. "There's no stronger bond than that of a fated mate pair," Anthony said, then slowly turned, his eyes glowing with a silvery magic I'd never seen before. Previously, his eyes had flared purple. Was this his true magic? Was he finally letting it free? "Nothing stronger." "Really?" I crossed my arms over my chest. "Then why are you burning down the castle that your mate is staying in?" He pressed his lips into a thin line. "What was your plan?" I continued, because it was obvious he couldn't or wouldn't answer. "Burn it all and then fly away again?" He shook his head. "Then what?" I asked, desperate to know just how dark his thoughts had turned. "You were going to end it all and throw yourself off the edge?" He didn't move or rebut my statement, and my heart gave a frightened lurch. I went on, as if he'd confirmed my suspicion. "Wouldn't your dragon save you, Anthony? If you threw yourself off the edge here, would you not simply shift and fly away?" He shrugged. "I don't know. My magic is too powerful now. I can't stop it. Maybe it would let me die. I'm not worthy of it." I frowned at him, trying not to show how much his mood was scaring me. "You're really not making any sense. You finally found me, and you just want to give up on life? On us?" "You rejected me," he croaked, his voice thick with emotion. "You don't want to stay with me. You want to go home, to the human world, which you have every right to do." He sounded hollow and depressed, and it brought tears to my eyes. I stamped my foot, desperate to get through to him, then regretted the action as pain coursed up my ankle. "Stop being such a drama queen! We had a fight because I was mad at you, and rightly so. You made love to me, then left me. I'm the one who's allowed to be angry, but that doesn't mean you just give up on us." His eyes burned with a fiery glow that slowly turned more red than silver. "You don't want to go home anymore?" "Well, I kinda do," I muttered. "But only because you're still being an idiot. If you pull yourself together and deal with all that shit about your magic and stuff, then I'll stay. We're meant to be together, aren't we?" I sounded like the idiot now, waxing lyrical about us being fated, but I had to get him to listen to reason. Anthony jumped down, landing on the stones in front of me. "But I'm an abomination." I rolled my eyes. "You are not. You're perfect." "Perfect," he whispered. "Well, for me, anyway." I flipped my hair back off my face. I was sweating now, and everything was sticking to me. I couldn't tell if it was the heat of the fire behind us or nervous tension. But right this second, I was glad of the frigid air. "Isn't that how the fated mate thing works?" I added. "If you're a freak, then I must be too if we're perfectly matched, but I don't think that's how it is." "Anthony!" Karlak's scream penetrated our conversation. Anthony and I jerked and turned to face the door, just as a wooden beam cracked and broke amidst the fire. I cried out, falling back against Anthony's chest. "Your brother's still in there. You need to stop the inferno." "I don't know how." Anthony sounded desperate, but he still pushed me behind him and rushed toward the flames with the obvious intention of trying to help his brother. "You do know how! You have to!" I screamed out. "You made the fire with your magic. You can use your magic to stop it, too." I had no idea how magic worked, but we had to save Karlak and the castle before it all collapsed into dust. I grabbed Anthony's arm and yelled above the sound of the inferno around us. "You said you're more powerful than you ever realized. You have to use that power to save your brother." "I'm afraid," Anthony whispered, though I heard it as clear as day. "Not as afraid as I am, as your brother is," I cried, tears streaming down my face. I didn't know where the next words came from, perhaps a mixture of my dreams and everything I'd learned since I'd arrived. Or perhaps it was simply intuition. I tapped into every bit of inner knowledge I had. Anthony needed me as much as I needed him. He'd saved my life and given me a second chance the night he found me. Now it was my turn to show him the way home again. "Stop denying who you are and step up. You might not be the next king, but you're still a prince of the Black Mountains. And you're also the most powerful sorcerer this world has ever known. Use that and do some good." Anthony stared at me for a second, then turned to the fire and roared, thrusting his arms out in front of him and calling back the flames. I stumbled back, staring in awe as flames blazed in Anthony's palms, and he sucked the fire from the tower and back into himself. The moment all the flames were gone, he groaned, falling to his knees. I grabbed for his shoulder. "Well done!" "Go." He groaned again, hugging his middle as if in pain. "Find Karlak." Smoke still filled the hallway, but I found Anthony's brother easily. He had collapsed against a wall, and he didn't appear to be breathing. Frantically, I ran my hands over him. He didn't have any wounds that I could feel or see. His pulse was thin and weak, but it was there. I rolled him onto his side and belted him on the back, but it was no use. His lungs were filled with smoke, and I couldn't clear them out. "Anthony!" I screamed. "We've got to get him into the clear air. Help me!" I jumped up and grabbed Karlak's wrists, then began tugging him in the direction of the balcony. It was the only source of fresh air available. He was so heavy, but I hefted him along, desperate to get him outside. "Help!" I screamed, and pounding sounded on the stairs as men ran to our aid. "Help me get him to the balcony!" Two of the servants lifted their future king and hauled him into the fresh air. I pressed a frantic hand to his chest. "He's still not breathing. Anthony, you've got to help him!" Anthony was as pale as a bottle of milk, clearly still recovering from the effort of containing the fire, but he crawled over to his brother and set his hands hovering over Karlak's chest area. He closed his eyes and gasped out, sounding as though he were taking Karlak's pain and suffering into him, just as he'd absorbed the fire. His hands glowed with white light. Black tendrils of smoke lifted through Karlak's shirt and drifted up into Anthony's hands. The servants gasped, falling back. "The prince has magic!" "Yes, he does," I snapped at them. "And he's saving your future king's life, so you better hope his magic is as strong as the queen's." I had no idea how strong Marianne's magic was, but when the servants bowed their heads, I knew I'd said the right thing. Karlak began to cough, then gasp for breath. "Sit him up!" I cried, rushing for his back and pushing him up. The servants helped me get him into a sitting position, and he coughed some more. Finally, he opened his eyes, and Anthony fell forward, his head on his brother's thigh, his shoulders shaking with the strength of his emotions and the effort of saving his brother. Karlak stared down at Anthony, then up at me where I crouched next to them both. "You okay?" I asked Karlak. He nodded, then slowly put his hand on Anthony's head. "It's okay, brother. Everything's going to be okay." I crawled around him to Anthony, who had rolled off Karlak. He knelt in a prayer position and began to weep. I put my arms around my mate's back and wept with him. Chapter 13. Anthony. I'd almost killed my brother. I'd almost destroyed our family's home. And lost my mate. All because I couldn't control the magic I'd been born with and the rage that had built over the years. Loud whooshing met my ears. I looked up to see my father flying toward us at a furious pace. I swiped at the tears on my face and straightened my back before standing and assisting Charity to her feet beside me. Karlak climbed up too, and the three of us stood watching as Dad descended. He hovered over us and turned so that we could see Mom on his back, her face aghast. "Oh, my boys!" She materialized beside us, her arms around both our shoulders. "My big, brave sons. I'm so glad you're both all right, and you too, dear Charity." "Should we go inside?" Charity suggested gently. "Somewhere warm for us non-shifters." I turned toward the door, but Mom reached out. "Everyone, hold hands. I'll transport us down into the dining room." Charity grabbed hold of one of my hands and one of Karlak's. White light shimmered all around us. Then we were downstairs beside the fire in the grate, a bearskin rug beneath us, and the dining table nearby. Mom moved to inspect Karlak, running her hands over his face and head. Charity stood up and shivered. "Well, that was intense." I couldn't help but ask, "Which part do you mean?" She rushed over to the fire, putting her hands out to warm her palms. Well, all of it, I guess. But that transportation trick of your mom's is very cool." "Very cool," I repeated, managing to stagger sideways so that I could sit on the large sofa near the fire. Every part of my body was slow and dragging. Using that much magic to contain and kill the fire felt like it had drained my soul. The doors slammed open at that point, and Dad marched in, wrapping a robe around his body as he did so. "What the hell happened?" I groaned and leaned back against the sofa. Where to even start? Mom and Dad got Karlak up and moving, walking around the room. "You okay, son?" Karlak nodded. "Yeah, I'm fine, Dad. Thanks to Anthony and Charity." I gripped my head, then dragged my hands down my face. "The only reason you were in danger in the first place was because of me, brother." Karlak turned to stare at me. "I'm a dragon. I know better than to try and charge through an out-of-control fire, then get overwhelmed by the smoke. I could have turned back and headed downstairs to get help. I was stupid." My face heated with shame. "You weren't the stupid one." I stood up. "I'm sorry, brother." I took a step forward with my arms open, and Karlak rushed over to hug me tight. My heart swelled with love for my older brother. When he pulled away, he smiled softly. "I'm going to rest. Then I'll go home to my wife." "You're going to leave me with Mom and Dad?" I gaped at him, only half teasing. Karlak laughed. "You deserve to have your ass chewed out. But it's not Mom and Dad I'd be worried about." Carlac gave a pointed look in the direction of the fire where Charity still stood. I nodded. Yeah, I was beginning to realize how important the fated mate bond was. No matter how mad or disappointed my parents had been with me in the past, I'd never considered throwing myself to my death. Never. But the true devastation that had come from Charity walking away from me had been overwhelming. Mom walked over to me, reached out, and gripped both my hands. "Your magic got out of control." I glanced over at Charity, who was watching me carefully, like she wasn't sure what to make of me anymore. I nodded. Yes, it felt like... I wasn't sure how to explain it, but I owed it to everyone to try. Like my dragon and my magic were fighting a battle deep down inside of me, and I couldn't get either one of them to calm down. Mom smiled gently. "It actually sounds like your magic won the battle for once. You generally shift to squash your magic down and push it away, don't you?" I gulped, my throat tightening. I didn't like the idea that my magic had defeated my dragon, but I hadn't shifted. So what was the answer? Mom turned to Charity, let go of one of my hands, then gestured for my mate to come closer. "May I see what happened from your perspective, Charity?" See? Oh, crap. Charity crept forward, her arms crossed over her chest. "Yes, you may. What do I need to do?" "Just hold my hand," Mom said. "And I'll look into your memories, if you allow it." Charity's gaze slid to mine, and I gave her a stiff nod. "It's safe, but if you feel uncomfortable..." "I'm not uncomfortable with your mother's magic," Charity declared, lifting her chin and daring me to comment. "Please do whatever you need to." Mom grabbed both of our hands, and although I tried to pull away, she didn't let me go. I closed my eyes and tried to lift a magical shield against the visions my mother was about to share with me. I wasn't sure I was ready to see myself in that state. But my magic was untrained and weak when compared to my mother's. Into my head flashed feelings of fear and anger, but also a deep sense of needing to help. Love, even. Maybe. There was Charity, rushing through the smoke and fire, talking me down off the ledge, seeing my magic, wanting me to make the right choice. Then she was saving Carlac, dragging him along the stones. My magic shimmered on my brother's chest. Smoke filled the air. Mom let go of my hand and staggered forward, grasping the couch for strength as she coughed and cried out, then sobbed. "My babies!" Dad wrapped her in his arms, holding her tight and whispering sweet words of reassurance and love. I glanced at my mate, who was watching my parents together with a look on her face that spoke of shock and wonder. Their love was epic, the stuff fables were written about. I'd grown up around it and considered that sort of devotion normal. But from that look on Charity's face, she'd never seen such a love before. It was the love of a fated mate pair. The best kind of love. When Mom could stand once more, she opened her arms to Charity, who went in for a hug. "Thank you," Mom whispered, stroking Charity's hair as she held my mate to her shoulder. "You saved them. Saved them both." When Charity pulled back, she had tears in her eyes. "It was my fault. I should never have—" "No," Mom interrupted. "If this is anyone's fault, it is mine. I shouldn't have allowed Anthony to hide his magic from the world. I knew how strong he was and how upset he was with the whole magic side of himself, and I did nothing about it. I should have—" She covered her mouth with her hand, and I sighed, walking toward them both. "No, Charity, and no, Mom. This is my fault. All my fault. I've been a coward my whole life, and it's time I finally accepted who I am. That means my magic side, as well as my shifter side. Instead of accepting me, I tried to hide it. I lied. And it is time I took responsibility for those choices that I've made and the consequences that ensued. I lied to my brother and my friends, our people. It's time they knew who I am, truly, if they don't already. I smiled tentatively at Charity, who smiled back. Yeah, not sure how fast gossip flies around the castle, but those two guys on the roof were pretty shocked when they saw you do your thing. My thing? I laughed briefly, then shook myself. I think I'm going to need a lot more practice before it's considered my thing. Charity glanced at my mother. Well, you have the perfect teacher right here. Mom nodded at me. I would love to help teach you how to manage your magic, son. When you're ready, let me know, and I'll be there. She cupped Charity's face and sighed. I'm going to leave you two to talk. It's time for bed. Dad lifted Mom up in his arms and carried her from the room. Charity stared after them with a grin and a headshake. That's where you get it from. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Yeah, well, you're too beautiful to walk. And it gives me an excuse to hold you. Charity sobered, her expression falling. Your mum's right. We do need to talk. We certainly did. Yes, we do. Shall we talk here, or go to my bedroom? She stared at me, her eyes twin pools of shimmering uncertainty. How about we start here, I suggested, taking her hand and pulling her toward the chairs in front of the fireplace. We sat in our chairs, the fire warm on our faces. Where should we start? Charity asked, her voice a touch squeaky and uncertain. I coughed a little to clear my throat. I'll start with an apology. Though I owe you many, I'll get to the most important one first. I'm so sorry for leaving you in the library this afternoon. Making love to you was the most magnificent moment of my life, and I ruined it for both of us. Charity stared down at her hands, which were clasped in her lap. You kinda did, yes. It was extremely hurtful and confusing. Will you forgive me? I asked, around the sudden lump in my throat. She lifted her chin. I will over time, I'm sure. And now? I asked, my heart beating a little faster. I'll do anything for a second chance with you. Anything. What can I do now to make things right? She stared at me with narrowed eyes, as if considering and discarding several responses. And then she came out with the last thing I was expecting. You mentioned this several minutes ago when your mum was here, but I want to confirm whether or not you mean it. Anthony, I want you to accept your magic and start doing lessons with your mum to control it. I sat up straighter, familiar fear eating at me. I knew I had to accept myself, and that meant accepting my magic as well as everything else. It was just difficult to acknowledge when I'd spent a lifetime avoiding it. Well, You've already started on that path, she continued. Those two servants saw you save Karlak, and they'll tell everyone, surely. They might, because they knew what it meant. But they might simply keep it to themselves, thinking that's what the family would want. And I knew I couldn't rely on a couple of servants to maybe or maybe not spread the word. This had to be up to me. It had to be a conscious decision, which meant I had to do what she said and own up to everything, to everyone. What are you most afraid of? She reached out and gripped my hand. Surely nothing worse than what happened tonight. Her smile was tentative, but she was right. I thought about it, considering the situation from every angle, and couldn't quite think why I'd held on to my secret for so long. I started talking, because often that revealed the problem. When I was young, I didn't want to be different to my brother and all my friends. Then I grew older and, well, then I felt trapped, I think. In my lie. It was like the longer it went on, the harder it became to reveal the truth. And then, of course, the more I tried to hide my magic, contain it, the more it tried to get out. And my fear of losing control only grew. My heart squeezed at the realization that I'd actually created my own cage. Oh my God, I did this to myself. And everything I tried to do to control it all only made things worse. Charity laughed. We all create problems in our own heads sometimes. But I need to tell you something else. I swallowed hard. The reason I came to find you that day was because my mother showed me a vision of you being attacked by that guy near your restaurant. I had to save you. Charity grinned at me. Why would I be upset about that? I'm freaking glad your mom showed you that, or I'd likely still be in hospital somewhere, or worse. Worse, I whispered, shuddering at the memory of what I'd seen in that vision. She winced a little. Well then, even better that you did come and save me. She waited for my response, but I just sighed. She frowned. There's something else, isn't there? I nodded. Yes. Mom showed me a vision of you pregnant, wrapped in flames. She told me that if I didn't learn to control my magic, then something terrible was going to happen to you. And I've been trying even harder to tamp down my magic since then. A swift intake of breath was Charity's only reaction for several seconds. Eventually she whispered, So does that mean it's still coming? You know, when I'm pregnant? Or are we done now? I don't know. I shook my head, worry for my mate filling my chest and making it hard to breathe properly. Can you find out? She asked. Can we go ask your mom, or can you do it? My brows rose. Could I? I'd looked into the future for Veronica, and I hadn't even meant to. Could I do it now for Charity? We could try, I ventured. And if not, we can always ask Mom in the morning. She'd help if we needed her to, I was sure of it. I stood up and held both hands out in front of me. Charity got to her feet a little slower. She was obviously hesitant. Does it hurt? I shook my head. It's like when Mom viewed your memory of the fire. Doesn't hurt at all. Just give me your hands, and I'll see if I can do this. She slipped her hands into mine, palm against palm. I reached for my magic and called upon it for help in a way I'd never done before. The power lurched up inside me as if it had been waiting for this moment. It was eager and happy, and the vision hit us both so fast that Charity dragged her hands out of mine, stopping the images. What the hell was that? That's the vision. It'll be like a movie, sort of. Flashes of the future. She was glaring at me, not sure. That wasn't like when your mom did it before. Probably because Mom was taking images out of Charity's head rather than projecting them into her mind. Or maybe I just wasn't good at it. It didn't hurt, did it? We can wait for my mother tomorrow if you'd prefer. Charity shook her head and took a steadying breath. No, it didn't hurt. It was just unexpected. Let's do it now. I held out my hands once more, and this time it was even easier to draw upon the magic inside me. The vision flashed into both of our minds, and this time I held tight to Charity's hands, stroking my thumbs over her skin in reassurance. There she was, standing in our bedroom, cupping her swollen belly. Pregnant and stunningly beautiful. A wave of love for her washed over me. But what of the fire? Our future? Charity turned to look toward the bedroom door, and I walked into the room, a huge smile on my face. In my arms were 2 children. A little boy of about 4 years old was riding high on my shoulders, and another, about 2, sat in my arms wriggling like a little fish and giggling. Our family. Safe and well. The happiness in the room was a palpable, very real thing, and all of a sudden, I couldn't breathe. I let go of Charity's hands, needing the vision to end. I fell into the chair I'd been sitting in only moments before, gasping for air. "What's wrong?" Charity rushed to my side and knelt. "Are you okay?" I nodded, focusing on my chest going in and out. "Yeah, I kept breathing, forcing the air in and out of my body until I could finally relax once more. Charity stood and made a pretense of warming herself at the fire. "Please tell me you didn't just have a panic attack at the sight of us having multiple children, Anthony." She put her hands on her hips, obviously indignant, and I started to laugh. "No, sweetheart, not at all." I stood and pulled her into my arms, cupping her head with one hand and holding her to my chest. "No, I think I just became totally overwhelmed with relief. There's no destructive fire in your future, only happiness. For both of us. It shocked me after the last terrifying vision I saw. Something has changed for us. Something good." "Did you feel that happiness in the vision?" "I did," she said, her voice a little shy. "Yes, it was beautiful," I admitted. I'd never dreamt I could be that happy. Nor that a woman as beautiful and amazing as Charity would love me and want to create a future, a family, with me. Charity looked up at me, her face full of the longing I'd always hoped to see in my mate's eyes. "Let's go to bed. I want to see your room now." I leaned down and pressed a loving kiss to her forehead before stroking back her hair. The brief touch was merely a taste of what I wanted to experience with her. "I can't think of anything I'd like more, beautiful." I took her hand and guided her out of the dining room. It was time to show my mate how much I loved her. Chapter 14. Charity. Part of me believed I should wait before jumping back into bed with Anthony, especially after the tumultuous day we'd had. But I needed to reconnect with him in the strongest way, and I could sense that his need was just as strong. It was as if we'd climbed a mountain together and been given the greatest gift. We had discovered that we were meant to be together with almost perfect certainty. Nothing could have made me happier than to know that this man would love and cherish me forever. "So, I suppose we're staying here," I joked, as Anthony dragged me down the hallway and pushed open the heavy wooden door that led to his bedroom quarters. He turned to look at me with a silver light blazing in his eyes. "You want to return to your human world? If you want that, I will come too." Stay here and be a princess, or go back to management in hospitality? Such a tough choice. No, not for good. But to say goodbye and collect some of my personal things. Sell my apartment. Anthony ushered me inside, then shut the door behind us and turned to face me. I swallowed hard, my heart singing when I saw the intense desire that decorated his features. For a moment I lost my train of thought. What was I saying? Something about my apartment. Not that any of that stuff matters right now. He shook his head. "We'll work everything out. Together. I promise." I nodded and gave up trying to remember our conversation. I took a step toward him. The room was warm, the fireplace crackling with heat, and yet I shivered with anticipation. Anthony stepped close, cupping my face with his large hands. "I promise I'm going to be better. For you. For the amazing future we're going to have." I nodded, too full of emotion to talk more. I slid my hands up his chest and wrapped my arms around his neck. The time for talking was done. His lips crashed down onto mine. I screamed and gasped for air, my whole body shaking as we shared a perfect moment in time. Anthony collapsed on top of me and then rolled to the side so he didn't crush me. "Oh my God, that was awesome." I reached for his face, cupping his cheek as I got to look at him in post-coital bliss. "You're not going to run away this time?" Anthony shook his head, his eyes serious. "Never again, Charity. I love you." I leaned forward and kissed his lips, then pulled back to tell him how I felt. "I love you too." Epilogue. 3 months later. Anthony. Charity wouldn't agree to marry me until we'd known each other for over a month. And by the time she finally said yes, she was pregnant. We had cause for more than just one thing to celebrate. The wedding ceremony had gone beautifully, and now we were all gathered in the great hall enjoying a feast. I stood by the dance floor, enjoying watching all my friends and family dancing the night away. Dad had asked Charity to dance, and he was gently spinning her around in time with the music. "Enjoying your night?" Mom asked as she walked toward me, dressed in the most royal purple, over-the-top gown I'd ever seen her wear. "I am, Mom. Thank you for everything." She had been teaching me how to use my magic, and things were going well in that regard. I still had moments where I instinctively went to stifle it down, but those moments were becoming less frequent. And now that I was leaning into that side of myself, my magic seemed less prone to spill out in unexpected ways. I was on a journey to self-learning, and while I wasn't there yet, Charity's love and positive presence, and my mum's magical guidance, were helping me along the path to self-acceptance. She put her arms out, and I hugged her tight. "I'm so happy for you, Anthony. You've found your fated mate, you're going to be a father, and our people know that there will be a sorcerer looking after them, even after I'm gone." I pulled back and frowned down at her. "You're not dying any time soon, Mom." She cupped my chin and squeezed. "I know. Still, you've finally stepped into being the man you were born to be. I'm so proud of you." I looked away and laughed, afraid I might cry if she kept looking at me like that. "Something I always wanted to ask you," I said to her. "Charity used to dream about me. I know she told you." She nodded. "Yes? What's your question?" "Did you put those dreams in her head?" I wouldn't have been surprised if she did. Mom raised a single eyebrow at me. "You think I'd put those types of erotic images into her mind? No, son. That was not me." My cheeks heated with embarrassment. "Then who was it?" She shrugged. "You, more than likely." "Me?" I said. "I didn't do that." Mom laughed. "You underestimate your magic, Anthony. Your magic and the fated mate bond. I'm sure it found a way, while you were sleeping, to find your mate and get her ready for you." The strength of that statement hit me like a brick. "Wow, that's incredible." "I know." She leaned forward and kissed my cheek. "I'll leave you to enjoy your night. I love you." "I love you too, Mum." She glided away, and Veronica sidled up next to me, a glass of wine in her hand. I raised an eyebrow at the girl I'd known from the moment she was born. "Hitting the alcohol now, dragon daughter." Veronica's blue eyes flared, and she tossed her long blonde hair over her shoulder. "I'm 18, she said, indignation clear in her voice. "It's legal." In European countries, anyway. "So, what are you doing standing over here?" she asked, turning to stand by my side so we could both watch everyone enjoying themselves. "Surveying your kingdom?" I scoffed at her. "Second-born son, child. Haven't you learned how things go?" She punched me in the arm, hard. "Hey!" I glared at her. "It's my wedding day. You're meant to be nice to me." She didn't apologize, but she didn't punch me again either. Instead, she went back to sipping on her drink. "It's still your kingdom, you know," she said after a while. "Karlak might be king one day, but you're the sorcerer now, yeah?" I shrugged. "I suppose. My mom's been teaching me how to use my magic, but I'm decades behind her in experience. The lessons had been going well, though I may have blown up a few things along the way. Yeah, but your mom's not going anywhere, so you have time to learn. True, I said, already having seen a vision of the day of my parents' passing. Thankfully it was many, many years from now, and I tried not to dwell on it too much. Veronica didn't say anything more, but she didn't leave my side. A twinge of something uncomfortable began to niggle at me. "What do you need, dragon daughter?" I asked, not turning to look at her. She didn't hit me, which meant she was about to get serious. "You know when you came over for lunch that time?" I searched my memory, unsure of which event she was talking about. But then it hit me. "Oh, you mean when I accidentally gave you a vision of your future?" I'd forgotten about that, sort of. I'd been so consumed with my own secrets and lies, I'd pushed that very juicy piece of information away. Ian and Veronica were twin flames of fury. They'd burn the world down with their love, if they could get past their long-held grudge against one another. And now that she mentioned it, "So what are you going to do about that?" I turned to face her and raised a querying brow. "Nothing." She tipped back her head and finished the rest of her drink in one gulp. "What do you mean, nothing?" I asked, chuckling softly. "You know who your fated mate is, and you're going to ignore him." That just wasn't done. She was legal age. He was 5 years older, maybe a little more. They were a perfect match, except for the fact that they were cousins. But surely fate wouldn't have gotten it wrong. Veronica lifted her chin. "I've taken a job in the human world. I'm leaving next week." My jaw dropped. "Are you kidding me?" "Nope. I'm going to look after some kids for a family I met online. Maybe travel Europe for a while." I couldn't believe it. "And your parents are just letting you go?" Her eyes sparked with a challenge. "Let them try and stop me." I would have laughed if I didn't know her better. She was serious. And short of locking her up in a tower, her parents didn't have a hope of stopping her. Perhaps this was what they'd been fighting about that day I'd visited. I shook my head at her. "You're running away from your future, which is very interesting, Veronica. I thought you were the fearless one among us. But I won't be the one to try and talk you out of it. Hell, I've been running away from who I was my whole life, until now. I won't throw stones." "I'm not running away from who I am." This time I burst out laughing. "Oh, baby girl, you are. You're a dragon princess. You're the fated mate of a prince. You don't have to work a day in your life, and instead of enjoying your position and doing good in your kingdom and accepting your fated mate, you're going to travel and work for humans. Makes perfect sense." I continued to laugh until my beautiful mate walked up, pink in the cheeks from dancing too long. "What are you two talking about? 'Cause whatever it is, count me in. I need something funny to take my mind off this nausea." "Dad twirl you around too many times?" I asked with a grin. She burped a little, then covered her mouth and said, "Excuse me." I put my arm around Charity's shoulders and tugged her close. "You're beautiful, even when you burp." And she was. Today had been perfect in every way. Charity rolled her eyes. "I feel disgusting, but I'm glad you think I look pretty." "You look amazing," Veronica said. "And congratulations on your pregnancy." Charity grinned wide. Pride shone in her eyes. "Thank you. We were going to keep it quiet, but the moment I hit 6 weeks I started vomiting, and, well, it's been impossible to keep quiet since." I kissed my mate's forehead and held her tight. "I think we should dance. I promise to take it slow." There was a soft, slow song being played, which was perfect for my bride's woozy stomach. Oh, that would be lovely. Charity turned toward Veronica. Lovely to see you again. I smiled at the dragon daughter, then lifted my free hand to wiggle my fingers. You sure you don't want another vision? Not that I'd been controlling it the first time I'd shown her who her fated mate was, but I could bring up the same images now, I was sure. Veronica backed away so fast I couldn't help but laugh. Bye, dragon daughter. What was that about? Charity asked, as I took her hand and led her onto the dance floor. I set my hand to my wife's still normal-sized waist and took her fingers in mine. Long story short, I accidentally showed Veronica who her fated mate was. I couldn't control the vision, and now she's running away to the human world to avoid him. Charity glanced around the room. Who is it? I glanced in the direction of Stavrock's table, and Ian caught my eye with a grin before I turned back to Charity once more. It's probably best if I don't tell you. My bride laughed. Probably. I'm not sure I could keep a straight face when I saw them. He doesn't know, I told her. Well, I don't think he does. I haven't told him anyway. Charity tangled her fingers in the hair at the base of my neck. I'm sure he knows. I frowned at her, manoeuvring her around the dance floor and making sure not to twirl her too fast. What do you mean? Charity stared at me like I was the one not making sense. What happens when a male dragon shifter sees his fated mate for the first time? Oh. She was correct. There was no way that Ian didn't know Veronica was meant to be his. You're right. Then why? I shook my head. No, not tonight. They can sort out their own shit. I want to celebrate us and our baby tonight. Charity smiled up at me, her eyes misting with tears. It really was the perfect day. It was. My arms tightened around her. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And tonight, I'll hold you in our bed and count my lucky stars that you're mine. Charity dropped her head, then stared up at me through her eyelashes. I'm sure we can do more than just cuddle. My cock instantly throbbed at the mention of a proper wedding night. I pulled her closer and danced even slower, letting my dragon purr with happiness and desire simmer deliciously below the surface. That night, I carried my new wife across the threshold straight into bed, and she fell asleep in my arms. Her pregnancy made her exhausted, and it had been a long day. I had every respect for her need to rest, and knew that when she woke, there would be plenty of time to make love. Thanks to her love, and the fact that she didn't give up on me, even when I wanted to give up on myself, we had the rest of our lives to enjoy one another.